The international community, through both international law and non-legal measures, has ultimately failed to respond effectively to the threat of the lack of protection of the international community against war crimes. Although there have been numerous laws, both international and domestic, passed in regards to upholding this human right, it is obvious that it has become increasingly more difficult to prosecute individuals that have committed war crimes due to the international influence of the United Nations, or the UN, and their Security Council, as well as a nation's right to state sovereignty and the inability for the International Criminal Court, the ICC, to enforce rules when created by them. The international treaty titled the Rome Statute 1998, when combined with the legislation, the Geneva Conventions 1949, outlined the things that contribute to what is and what is not classified as a war crime. The Geneva Conventions 1949 were created after World War II to ensure that the atrocities that occurred during this war, i.e. the Holocaust, had specific laws that targeted the prosecution and punishment of those who had committed acts of war crimes. The Geneva Convention 1949 specifically outlined what was allowed in war, whereas the Rome Statute 1998 was specifically created to outline what was not allowed in war. A war crime can be characterized as any act in war that is a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions 1949. However, there are some acts that are specifically prohibited. According to the International Criminal Court, these prohibited acts include, but are not limited to, murder, mutilation, cruel treatment and torture, taking hostages, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, intentionally directing attacks against buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, science, or charitable purposes, historical monuments or hospitals, pillaging, rape, sexual slavery, forced pregnancy, or any other form of sexual violence, conscripting or enlisting children under the age of 15 into armed forces or groups, or using them to participate in active hostilities. An international figure of authority that can promote international cooperation and improve the development of human rights is the UN, which was also created shortly after World War II. The General Assembly of the UN seeks to promote human rights by developing new international laws to protect the international community. The secondary body of the UN is the Security Council. The Security Council consists of 15 members, 10 of which are constantly rotating, 5 of which are permanent. These permanent bodies are America, Russia, France, England, and China. The Security Council can authorize things like peacekeeping, military action, or sanctions. A key issue with this body that can be identified when discussing the effectiveness of the promotion and protection of human rights is the Permanent Five's ability to veto any issue that is brought to them. A real-time example of this proving to be a significant issue in the protection of human rights, especially in the case of protecting against war crimes, is the current conflict between Israel and Palestine. A case launched by South Africa against Israel accusing them of genocide was presented to the UN Security Council, whereby it was quickly vetoed by America due to its geopolitical relations with Israel. Despite the ongoing reports of excessive bombings of civilian inhabited areas causing significant casualties of women and children civilians, and the restriction of war-based aid to civilians that were hiding in the city of Ramallah, the designated safe place that Israel assigned for civilians to use, which were both considered significant war crimes, there has been no further action to prosecute nor halt Israel's actions. This example illustrates the ineffectiveness of the protection of human rights of the international community in terms of international legislation and international governing bodies that have the ability to prosecute individuals who have committed acts that deny human rights. In the conflict between Israel and Palestine, Israel has committed multiple acts of war crimes, and yet there has been no significant effort to prosecute any individuals that have committed those crimes against humanity. A non-legal body that aims to protect human rights is the Centre for Justice and Accountability, or the CJA. The CJA claims specifically to rebuild the stories of crimes from the point of view of victims and survivors, bringing these stories to light and attempting to push them towards a court of law. The CJA has pushed for the advancement of the Crimes Against Humanity bill, for it to be universally recognised, as well as the highlighting of the importance of the accountability for war crimes across all aspects of conflict. The body also funds treatments for torture survivors and has been advancing civil remedies for victims and survivors of acts of war crimes. A notable impact that the CJA has had on the international community is its ongoing pressure that is placed upon the UN to approve the Syrian War Crimes Accountability Act. This act aims to ensure that the investigation into the atrocities performed by the Assad regime and its allies such as ISIS is conducted with justice and compassion in mind. However, this non-legal measure does not have the ability to perform any form of prosecution, nor does it have the power to accuse countries of crimes that they may have committed. And if there is no recognition of this organisation in things such as the media, it is unlikely that any action will be taken to approve this act. This continues the conversation about the ineffectiveness of the protection of human rights in the international community, specifically in relation to the protection of war crimes. The overall effectiveness of both legal and non-legal measures that have been created to protect human rights is poor. Throughout the world, war crimes are continuously going unpunished through various conflicts due to the contradictive powers present in both the UN's General Assembly in hands with the Security Council. Although there are two separate international legislations that define what a war crime is, the international community still remains unprotected against war crimes due to the Security Council's ability to veto anything brought to them. Although many non-government organisations are created specifically to target the issue of war crimes, they do not have the ability to prosecute or charge an individual or state for their crimes. These organisations rely solely on the public awareness and recognition for any action to be taken. The effectiveness of the protection of the international community against war crimes is clearly at a poor standard, as there are limited actions that can be taken to enforce both legal and non-legal measures to combat the issue.